Today we have an extraordinary guest with us, Tom Goodlet. Tom is a best-selling author and a seasoned pastor with over 2 decades of experience in leadership, organizational development, and pastoral counseling. Tom has a wealth of knowledge and insights to share. His best-selling book, Blind Potential, is a testament to his expertise in personal and professional growth. Today we'll dive into Tom's leadership philosophies, his approach to mentorship and counseling, and the incredible journey that led him to become a trusted advisor and coach. Welcome to the spotlight, Tom. Tom, thank you for joining us on the podcast today. Really appreciate you.
My pleasure, man. Thanks for inviting me.
We've got our fabulous co-host, Kevin Etchmandia here.
Kevin.
And I wanted to jump right into everything and talk about leadership and organizational development.
Okay.
How did you, because now we got to go back a little bit, how did you get started in that? That seems like a big take to get into it.
In leadership and organizational development, how did I get started into that? I think as most people get into things, it started with a bad leader. I think sometimes I worked in an organization where I experienced on a daily basis what bad leadership looked like. And for me, it was a bit of a, I felt distraught. Because I had this idea, like, what's the point of me becoming a better leader if the guy above me stinks at it? Like, in other words, why try? And so, and what ended up happening was somebody else became a part of the organization, took an interest in me, gave me a book called 360-Degree Leader by John Maxwell.
Okay.
And it kind of wrecked my world for the good. It's one of those. Basically, it talked about how leadership, a lot of times when we think of leadership, we think of disseminating information down to the people who are under our supervision, that's leadership. But in 360-Degree Leader, it said that really good leaders also lead across to people who are on the same organizational plane as them, and great leaders also lead up. And so it really took away my excuses to just become a better leader when the guy above me becomes a better leader. Yeah. It made me decide, okay, it doesn't matter where I am on the org chart, I'm going to be a great leader.
You took accountability.
Yeah, and then it took away my excuses. But it also gave me a way out, in a way. And by the way, what tends to happen when you do that, it's called the law of the lid. And so if you've got if you have a poor leader above you, let's say if we just assign numbers to it, let's say they're a level 3 leader. But you're building skills where you're kind of a level 5 leader, you're going to hit that lid of them. And one of two things typically happens. One, they're going to see it as a threat because they don't know what a level 5 looks like because they're not. All they know is a level 3, right? And so then that causes angst, and they might try to get rid of you. Or you're going to leave because you're so frustrated to keep hitting that lid. Yeah. And so that's inevitably, kind of what happened. But it got me on a path. And like I said, that one guy took an interest in me, helped me expand my leadership, which expanded my career, which expanded my life. And then I decided that's a great thing to do as well, is to help other people be able to expand in their leadership.
So what does bad leadership look like? Because in order for you to understand what good is, you got to know what's wrong with it. What is bad leadership?
Man, if I'm going to try to
say this in the nicest way possible.
I'm trying to pick one. Is what I'm trying to do. I think there's a lot of things we could say. So let's start with this. Let's start with the idea that leadership is a subset of skills. It's not one particular skills. It's a combination of several skills come together. Sometimes we'll say people are born leaders, and what we mean is maybe they have one of those subset of skills that comes a little natural. Maybe they don't mind speaking in front of people. Maybe they're a great listener. But really, leadership is all that subset of skills. And here's the good news: if leadership is a subset of skills, then if you are willing to be teachable, if you're willing to learn, then you can always grow and become a better and better leader.
Okay.
And so anybody can be a great leader as long as they're willing to learn those skills. And so the opposite of those skills would definitely be poor leadership, or the willingness a lot of times not to learn, or to think you haven't already learned and there's nothing more to learn. A lot of times you'll see that, where you see people who think they've got it together, and the moment you do is the moment you don't. And so actually I'll throw this one in there too. So there's a study came out of Cornell University about 2014, about a 2-year study. And they're trying to find, are there any predictors of whether or not somebody is going to be successful in their ventures, in
Okay.
business and life. So, if you guys are going to be successful, if I'm going to be successful, are there any predictors whether or not somebody is going to be successful? And they followed around 72 different executives from 31 different companies that
Wow.
ranged anywhere from about $50 million to $5 billion in annual revenue. So a vast range of these executives. And they're just trying to find out any predictors of whether or not somebody can be successful. And right away, they found one rose to the top, and it stayed the number one answer for the remaining 2-year study. The number one predictor of whether you, me, or anybody else will be successful is simply self-awareness. How well does Dylan know Dylan? How well does Kevin know Kevin?
That's wonderful.
And the idea is, by the way, it'll be an ongoing education because you're growing, because you're learning, you're adapting, you're moving. And so it's a lifelong study. But the idea is, if the better you can understand you, then the better you can understand people who are not you and people around you.
Wow.
The better you can manage you, the better you can manage other people. And
That's
so
awesome.
I would say, just like the number one predictor of whether or not somebody's going to be successful, even as a leader, is going to be self-awareness. I would say one of the things really identifies, and you've probably experienced it, if you're in the room with somebody who's not very self-aware, it stunts their growth.
Yeah.
And you probably didn't want to stay in that room with them much longer.
Right. I've been in a lot of rooms like that, and I think to myself, I just wish you knew what was going on right now, because we all see it, and you're kind of odd manning yourself out.
You're right.
So I'd like to hear your take on this, because this is something I just started diving into a little bit.
Yeah.
Is a selfish person and a selfless person. Have you noticed that takes effect in someone's leadership? Like, I've seen it on a scale of you can be 30% selfish, 70% selfless, 50-50, the other way around. Have you ever taken note of that?
That's a great question. I think, because I don't think it's purely selfless. In other words, you still, in life and leadership, there are those times you need to put the oxygen mask on first. In other words, so that you can fill up others.
Yes.
And so there's all these different studies and books and these ideas that really, so take like your relationships. The idea is, if a lot of times we think, as a leader or just as an entrepreneur or a business owner, we want to be able to give and give and give and give to our customers, to our clients, to our employees, to our coworkers. We want to give. But you can't give what you don't already have. And so even in our relationships and in our decisions, we have to gain more than we drain. So there has to be, things in our life that make us sharper. And most often it's connected to another person, even if you're reading their book or their podcast or, paying for their course or what have you, that we have enough gain so that when it comes time to give, we can give in a high quality way.
Yeah.
And so I really think, I don't know that I would call that selfish, but I would call it strategic.
Okay.
In other words, if you're going to be selfless, then you also have to be strategic in order to do that, which part of taking care of others means taking care of yourself. And so there has to be, if you decide to take care of others, you have to also understand and take care of yourself. I'll say it this way too. Sometimes people go, revenue and goodwill have to be two separate things.
Okay.
But they're actually very interconnected.
Yeah, I would think so.
Right. If you want to do goodwill, you need revenue.
I promise you're reading my mind right now, because
Yeah.
I had just thought, something I love to do, and maybe it's, frowned upon a little bit, is I'll give to any homeless person anywhere on the side of the road. Like, whatever negative thoughts, I just put them aside and find some money in my wallet and give it to them. And part of that also drives me to, I want to give more, so I need to earn more. And that pushes me forward in the workplace. You watch videos online where someone, maybe they do it for internet, exciting stuff, but they'll give a homeless person $1,000 and just totally change their month or their year, or just set like a different mind state going forward for this person. And, I can't give $1,000.
Well, that's the thing. The person on the internet has $1,000 to give because they're so popular on the internet, right? Because they're making money off those internet videos, and now they have right. But that's the idea: is that revenue and goodwill are they're interconnected, and the more goodwill you do, the better chance you have to generate more revenue. The more revenue you generate, the better chance you have to give more goodwill.
I love that.
Yeah.
And with all this, like, what challenges do you see in leadership, and how do you advise people to rectify those challenges?
Well, there's a lot of challenges in leadership, but I think if we go back to kind of the first question too, the first challenge is ourselves, and kind of defining what kind of leader you want to be. And I think in leadership, we have the choices. But I think this is, even in entrepreneurship, I think everything ties back to leadership. If I quote John Maxwell again, he would say the world rises and falls on leadership. Our politics rise and fall, our way of life, even our own leadership. So one, it's determining what kind of leader we want to be. And do we want other people to influence that for good or for bad? But I think then there's challenges that come alongside that. In other words, one challenge in leadership would be, well, what do you want to get in trouble for? That's
wow.
Hold on, what?
Just had a light bulb going.
Hold on,
right.
one more time, please.
Okay, so one of the decisions you need to make as a leader is, what do you want to get in trouble for? Because there's certain. Well, let's.
Yeah, please, yeah.
Okay,
I'm like, my mind's everything.
I
love to cause trouble.
Let's
well, let's start with this. There's no safety in playing it safe.
right.
Okay, so if you're in an organization and you're trying to play things safe, you're not going to take risks. If you try to be a yes person, eventually they're going to go, "What are you contributing to the organization?"
Well, that's a risk. By playing it safe, that's a risk.
Sure, there you could argue it that way. Yeah. So just by trying, there's no safety in safety. In other words, it leads you to being a non-contributor, and you're the easiest one to cut. And so there you go. And so then you get to choose. Okay, well, if I'm going to get in trouble, do I want to get in trouble for trusting people too much or too little? Each one brings about different problems, but there's a choice you get to make in leadership. And for me, I personally decided I want to get in trouble for trusting people too much. I like the problems that come with that. Am I going to get burnt from time to time? Absolutely. But if I decide to trust the people too little, well, now I'm going to head down like the micromanagement camp and to do that. And we even know statistics. And let's just say from a strategic point, we know statistically people who are micromanaged make more mistakes.
Yeah.
Which is kind of ironic, right? Because
Yes.
that's why you micromanage, to but you stress them out, you throw them to the back part of their brain. They make more mistakes. They don't
have the freedom to make a mistake,
Right.
But a healthy mistake that actually pushes them, propels
right.
them forward.
Well, then they would be learning. And by the way, leaders are learners. So I think and then you set other people to do that. But you kind of got to embrace that sometimes I'm going to get in trouble for trusting people too much. And so when it happens, well, at least that's the kind of trouble I want to have and I want to do, or I want to have to deal with, kind of thing. And so it will happen. Another one would be time. There's not enough time in the day to please everybody, and so you got to disappoint the right people. You got to, and you kind of got to choose, who am I disappointing today? Who am I gonna, who's but these are.
Don't ask my wife who I'm just.
But that's a good one, right? And so, and what's interesting, I think, if you choose to disappoint the right people and please the right people, then I think there's some great benefits to it. I was sharing with you guys, before we started recording this, that I'm getting ready to take a 1 month vacation with my family. And this is something we've decided this is what we do. And so I've done as much as a 2-month vacation.
Oh, wow.
By the way, that year, so I worked technically 10 months out of the year, made more money that year than any other.
Wow.
So it's
You're describing success to me on
I'll
every
say
level.
just nose to the grindstone. You just knew what you needed to accomplish, or were there other mitigating factors?
There's a lot of factors. So here, I'll give you this one. Harvard Business Review, they did a study in 2011. And in this study, they found out that people who take 11 or more vacation days away from work each year are 30% more likely to receive a raise at work. So people who...
I'm going to submit my days off.
Yeah, put them in now. Make sure you hit at least 11. But people who take at least 11 or more vacation days away from work are 30% more likely to receive a raise at work. Why? Why do you guys think that is? I'll throw it back at you. I know the answer to the study, but
I think it's because they put it's almost like a form of gratitude. Like, it's not necessarily the right word, but knowing that you have that added time off, you put in the extra work before or after to get things accomplished, knowing that you can have your time off with your friends and family.
Okay, so so there was that. So one of the things they did find, especially afterwards, that if people spend time away from work, typically they spend quality time with quality people in their life, and so they come back to work filled.
Yes.
And so when you're feeling good, you feel filled up. No matter even how that time went, if you just feel like you spent it, you did something good there, then people are more motivated. They tend to be more productive, and so that was one thing they found. The other thing the study revealed is that people who take 11 or more vacation days away from work come back to work more skilled. They come back to more. Okay.
Love this.
So one of the reasons they come back to work skilled. Well, let's just try this. So statistically, we hang out with people who are very similar to us.
Right.
Our friends at college, probably even coworkers, siblings, people who have similar personalities, similar interests. There is only one human relationship where statistically we end up with somebody who's a bit different than us. Any guesses of what that is?
Significant other.
Yes, it is the mate relationship. Yeah. It is the only human relationship where opposites somehow attract. And by the way, when that happens, first we're in love, so we don't see it. We dismiss it. We go, she's just kind of quirky, or he's got interesting ideas, and then and we dismiss.
You put it in such an elegant way.
But then what happens is the fog of love begins to dissipate, and you realize I have just committed myself to somebody who's very different than me. But it's also why we celebrate people who you go to that wedding reception and the DJ goes, who's been married for 10 or more years? Hands go up, we clap. Then who 25 years, less hands, more claps. 50 years. It's those two old couples, and they get a standing ovation, right? Because there's no way that was easy for 50 years. There's two opposite people working it out. But we see the benefit and the blessing of that, and how many generations that benefits and blesses as well. And so one, when you're spending time away from work, you're typically spending time with people who are not like you. And you're figuring out how to work things out and problem solve with people who are not like you. And so when you come back to work, look, if you figure out how to deal with a moody spouse, you can handle anybody having a bad day at work. If you figured out how to navigate unruly kids, you can broker any business deal. All right. And so that's what they found out is that people who choose to spend more time with their families are better performers at work. One, because they feel good, and two, because they've created more skill.
Yep. Oh man. Yes, the wife component, but the kids, you're going on vacation with your kids. Yeah. Mine are 6 and 4. So I am in it and have been for 6 years on the, little one stage. Yep. And just the other day, what's today? Yeah, Monday. So Saturday. Whew. They were both quite spicy. Yep. Quite unruly. Yeah. They had a few great pockets of time filled with large buckets of not so good time. It was a rough day in our household on Saturday. Yesterday flipped the script and they were phenomenal. Yep. But Saturday, that's the kind of day that makes you realize if we can right the ship with two little ones that are trying to figure out their emotions and boundaries and hunger and nap and all these different things. They had meltdowns over nothing, and you're still trying to navigate it. You're like, oh, bad day at work, we're good.
Yeah.
We're good.
You can handle that.
Because by the end of the day, we're putting them to bed and we're closing their doors. My wife and I both went, thank God.
Yes.
Oh my God. Okay, all right, go sit on the couch. I'm putting a movie on.
Right.
No one else talk to me.
Right. If you want to work on your leadership, you want to work on your bargaining, you want to work on your problem solving, you want to work on your listening, you want to work on your navigating, take your family to Disney World for a weekend. Yeah. You'll get practice on all that stuff, right?
The negotiating skills of a 4-year-old?
Negotiating, yes.
Oh my God, you're going to try and negotiate your way out of a paper bag with a 4-year-old standing over you, and you're just like, I don't know how we're going to make it through this one. But
absolutely.
That's really interesting, the days off, the 11 or more, which is really interesting, which further... which leads me to another question is the companies that you see or people that you work with that have unlimited PTO compared to a set amount of PTO, a higher low amount of PTO? Like you have to work to earn it. Like what correlations do you see? Like I see the gears turning. Just go ahead and take whatever direction you want.
I mean, you could go to the one extreme, which is, the idea that what's kind of taught sometimes in the American workplace, that if you, show up early, stay late, never take a day off. Mm-hmm. The statistics don't show that you actually do better work, or that you're worth more to the company. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's stats that show if you work more than a 55-hour week, anything past that 55 hours, you're actually working against yourself. You're actually making mistakes and being counterproductive. And to do that, and I think you gotta go to sometimes we play by rules that aren't rules. Mm-hmm. In other words, are you paid for your time, or are you paid for your results?
Result.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but a lot of times people lose that, right? Yep. And so they think it's a time thing. So the answer to performance doesn't have a lot to do with how much time off you give people, or how much time or you don't give to people, or PTO or something like that. Really, where performance you're going to see is going to go up or down. It's really how connected they feel to the organization. So if we can dissect this one just a little bit, this is a fun one. Because the number one Googled question among CEOs is, how do I get my people to work harder?
Yeah. All
right. And we have it on the other side. How do I get my clients to engage more? How do I get them to do what I tell them to do? How do I? But that idea, and the answer is the same for all those questions. But but the answer isn't. Well, if you go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Go back to modern somewhat modern psychology, and the idea that it doesn't matter if there's a pandemic, doesn't matter if we're at war. As human beings, we have sets of needs that build upon each other, and so the baseline set of needs is physiological. In other words, we got to eat, we got to sleep. Mm-hmm. So if somebody can't afford to take care of their family because of how little you're paying them, if somebody doesn't have the security and mm-hmm. then all they're going to think about is, how am I going to feed my family? How am I going to pay the mortgage? How am I going to pay rent? How am I going to do? If that problem is not solved, then the brain will continually try to find a way to solve that problem. In other words, you're not going to inspire that person to work hard, or to do well, or to engage more.
Because they're in a famine mindset.
Exactly.
I need to survive.
Exactly. But let's say you pay them enough. Let's say you go ahead and they should be able to pay, feed their family tonight and put a roof over their head. Well, then the next one is safety. The next one, I need to feel safe. I need to feel okay. Well, right away, if you're going to go, hey, if you don't get this done, your job's at risk, that's not going to drive performance either, right? So right. So their brains are just going to go, okay. Typically, what we do then is insulate. We typically silo. Yeah. They stop talking. They kind of insulate what they got, protect what they got, to kind of ration it. Mm-hmm. And in the meantime, they're going to go find another place to work.
I was going to say, my first thought is, F this guy. I'm out of here.
You're exactly right. Yeah. Right. You're not going. That's not inspiring. Mm-hmm. But yet we do this a lot in the American workplace. We threaten pay and we threaten jobs in order to inspire people, to motivate them.
It's terrible.
No, you're right. But let's say you don't. Let's say you decide to go ahead and they're paid enough and they don't have to worry about job security. Then the third one is belonging, is the third need we have. We have a need to belong. And so we got, but in order to feel like we belong, we can still be quirky, we can still be interesting, we can still be unique, but we got to feel like, but Kevin gets me. And Kevin's cool that I'm here, and Dylan is cool that I'm here. And so when we feel that connection, and we're desperate for that, we want organizations we belong to. I'll just give you an example. Where do your significant others shop for groceries?
Publix.
Okay. My wife too, right? Because she belongs to Publix. Could she get groceries cheaper somewhere else? I'm sure she could, right? Yeah. But she goes, and we're out the other day, and she's like, I don't shop at that Publix. I shop at that Publix. It was like,
I've gotten in trouble for going to the wrong Publix.
Exactly.
Before. I'm like, you're not even here.
But I ask her, and what's the answer? What's the drive? Well, in this Publix, they're nicer. Mm-hmm. They have things better organized. What's she saying? I belong to this Publix. They get me. They know where I want to find things. They know how I want to be treated. So that's the Publix I belong to. And then what happens is, if we feel that in the workplace, if we've got belonging, if we've got safety, if we've got physiological needs, then our brain will go to the fourth need, and it won't stop till it solves it. And it's sometimes it's called esteem, but a lot of times it's called value. How do I add value to that which I belong to? Mm. So in other words, if I like you guys and I like this podcast, which I do, I like being here right now. Then what my brain has to go, I like it. I feel we have this connection going. Now mine is, how can I bring the most value to your listeners, to you guys, to the podcast, because I like where I'm part of.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to performance, it's the same thing. If people feel safe in the organization, they feel paid in the organization, they got their needs met, physiological, and they feel like they belong in the organization, you don't have to motivate them. Their brain does it for you and for them. It goes, how can I make sure I'm not the one bringing down the organization? How can I make sure I'm doing my part on the team? How can I make sure I, can bring this to the best place it can be?
I love that. That's something that's very top of mind for me. And I just look at it as effectiveness. How can I be the most effective person I possibly can be?
Yeah.
And I do tie a lot down to value. I love to look at numbers. It's part of what I do.
Yeah.
And I'll take anything I do and apply it to some sort of number, whether that's monetary, whether that's getting people to see or getting impressions or meeting more people who can influence and add to the business. But I look at it as sort of like you're paid for your mind at that point. Do you place any value higher or lower on people who are paid for their mind versus people who are paid for their time and their effectiveness? Because a pay for your mind person, you don't necessarily have to see them. They can work from home, they can be remote, but they have to be effective or they're just going to waste your time.
Yeah. So I think, I think all work is results driven. So in other words, you're still paying the plumber to fix the plumbing.
Yes.
Right. So no matter how much time it takes them, kind of thing. But you'll pay. There's a couple things we'll pay more for. Mm-hmm. All right. We will hire EQ over IQ.
Yes.
All the time. So we want the lawyer who's super smart, knows the law, but we'll hire the one who gets our case. We want the doctor who knows all about medicine, but we'll hire the one who can diagnose us because they can listen to us, because they can empathize with us, and to do that. And so we will happily pay more for that connection. We'll happily pay more for somebody who gets us. And so now if we go into, neuroscience, we could go, that's a fun one.
Yeah, but, I'm into it.
You're still, all right. So where the empathy where the EQ comes from is really the middle part of our brain, which is called the limbic system. And the limbic system is in charge of how we process and help other people process feelings. Mm-hmm. In other words, we're always feeling. Your kids are always feeling. And that's hard to predict because it's that part of the brain. We can strengthen and grow that part of the brain. It's just the slowest part of the brain to grow and develop.
Interesting.
And so that's why we value people who are great listeners, people who can really understand us, people and demonstrate that they understand us. And we will pay more for them. Well, they've spent more time really honing in and developing those skills that are slower to develop. So in answer to your question, do I think that's worth more? Yes, I think that is. And in order to do that, there's something too. Typically those people aren't available all the time. They're accessible, but they're not available.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we lose that, where we think, oh, in order to be the best for my clients or my customers, I have to be available to them all the time. Well, then you're not reserving any time to build your skill. And so the time you give them is going to be of lower quality.
Yep.
Where if you can reserve the time to build skill, then yes, you're going to pay for somebody who has less time to give to do that, but you're going to pay them more because that time is going to be filled with higher skill.
Yeah. I look at like CEOs of big companies, and the first thing you think a lot of time is they can't be there that often. When they're like chairman of 8 different businesses and they're in a Fortune 500, but then they are the highest paid, typically, person in the building. So I consider my time as how much in a day can I learn, can I grow? I love that we talked about earlier, like I'm for sure a know-it-all, and I love people who say, hey, you're just wrong here. And that's when I unlock the door. I'm like, oh, sure. Okay, let me figure this out.
Yeah.
So in your life, you're a pastor, or were a pastor?
Yeah, I was in vocational ministry for over 20 years. So I'm not on church staff anymore.
Okay.
Since I own 2 companies, I just sold one, but I still have a consulting company.
Okay.
That takes up the majority of time that I want to give.
I'm sure. How has your role in the church as a pastor, growth over time, how has that affected your ability to lead? I look at a pastor as like the ultimate leader. I mean, you're talking to potentially hundreds of people at a time, and you're changing the course of their week going forward. Because Sunday can mean a lot for people. How did that change your philosophies and mindset as a leader?
That is a great question. I think something, so for me, the majority of my vocational background is in church ministry and church leadership. And then when I thought, I kind of felt what I would say a calling, where I wanted to bring biblical principles into secular industries. I felt called beyond the walls of the church. And so I thought in that pursuit that I'm going to have to learn a whole new set of lessons in business. I'm going to have to learn a whole new set of lessons in leadership. What I quickly learned is they're the same lessons. There's, I'm just learning them a second time. Like, okay, wait, the same because it doesn't matter if you're trying to motivate 200 employees or 200 volunteers. The same needs apply. It's interesting how little money does kind of affect motivating, people to move. And so I realized that I learned a lot in 20 years of ministry that easily transferred the good and the bad into the market, into the marketplace, into the business world, and could do that. The same skills when you're preaching. So ours was the last two churches are that fairly large churches, and the same skills it took to preach to a room where there's over 1,000 people in it. Is the same skills to sell to a client and try to actually help them out with their problem in a one-on-one scenario. It's just the room's different, and maybe the volume's different.
I like that.
But I think it's there. There's some of those things that are just communication that's transferable, people that's transferable. The interesting thing, you work at a church, and so everybody has an opinion.
Well,
right? And then if you're the pastor, you might as well just put a target on your back, and just say, "Oh, apparently something on me says I want to hear your opinion." But it happens in business too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It happens. I remember talking to a buddy who quit his job, and he told me, he's like, I quit one crappy boss to just pick up 100, because he's going, now I got all these clients, and they're needy, and they got issues, they got opinions, and that's all they want to talk about. And so it's the same. It really is the same thing. I think what 20 years of ministry did, it gave me a fertile ground to learn a lot of hard lessons, good lessons, test some things out, and then transfer them. And so, but there was that stage where I thought, oh, I'm gonna have to. Other than you got to learn some acronyms and stuff that, what does that mean? I don't know, or some different expressions. But no, it's the same. It's the same. Truth is truth. It's the same truths, and they apply. What you learn in leadership there applies in leadership here.
I mean, I see a direct correlation between, pastoring, counseling within a church. I mean, because you're getting everyone's opinion. You're basically their counselor, correct? And then
plays a role.
Right. Yeah. And then consulting is, I can see how you can go from being a pastor to being a consultant.
Yeah.
Did you...
So just so you know, I wasn't the lead guy. Okay. I was the number 2 guy, which there's a whole lessons in that. Because then you still got to be able to lead up.
I love number 2 through 10. I love that. I've talked about that. And I tell people all the time, you don't need to be number 1.
Correct.
You don't need to own the business.
Yeah.
You don't need, there's this forced idea of everyone should be an entrepreneur. You start your own business, be your own person, be your own boss. That's so hard.
Yeah.
And you said yourself, I went from having 1 boss to having 100.
Yeah.
And that's a difficulty that Kevin has to face that all the time. And I, fortunate enough, I can pull myself away from that and say, hey, Kev, you got to deal with this.
Yeah.
But 2 through 10, your life is probably pretty good. You probably make great money. I talk about Tesla.
Okay.
2 through 50 are richer than anyone we know.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be that number 1. I love that you said that.
But going back to your that idea of being a counselor, in which you did get called on to do that, right? You biblical counsel and to do that, and then bring it over into consulting. Yes, I would say there is a correlation, but I can't. I mean, in publishing, I've done that area of the business. I've worked the marketing. I've worked the sales. I've worked you're still, even as an entrepreneur, you're playing the role of counselor, right? You have clients that are coming to you, and a lot of times what they tell you they want is not what they really want. The stat is something like 85% of the time what somebody tells you is the problem at first is not the real problem. Right? They're going to say, oh, I need it to be this price. And you realize, if you can counsel a little, that at the end of the day, the most important thing to them isn't the price. It's actually the result, or it's solving this problem. And then that price might be a little more adjustable than they thought. But you won't get there unless you can kind of, again, it's that EQ, understand what they're really saying and what they're coming to, and make sure they get that you get what they're saying. And then all of a sudden, but to me, it's the same things. Where even if you're an entrepreneur, or you're in sales, or you're customer service, or you're putting widgets on something and trying to figure out how to do it better, those same skills apply. So, how
should people lead up? That you've mentioned it a few times, and I absolutely love the concept. So, would love to hear a little bit more about empowering someone to lead up and.
So let's establish this too. So I have a lot of practice with that when you're the number 2 guy on staff. But but what I also realized too is even if you're the number 1, you still are accountable. There's still a board elder. There's still congregants. There's still autonomy is, I would say, a worthless pursuit because we never arrive. In other words, we want to be our own boss. We want to not depend on anybody. We don't want to. It doesn't work out. We always need somebody. We always need somebody's permission, somebody's acceptance, somebody's money, somebody's help, somebody's that. And to me, the quicker you can embrace the need for community over autonomy, the better business life and everything else goes.
Yeah, and I mean, I really want to lean into that real quick because I know I do. I know even I have to make decisions quickly sometimes, and everyone has to just kind of live with my decision. But 9 times out of 10, I'm even asking permission to everyone else before making the decision. I mean, I just called you this morning because we have a job next week. I have to hire someone that is going to work directly with him. And I had someone in mind, but I was like, just making sure I'm not missing something here. He was like, no, should I be missing something? And I was like, no, this isn't a trick question.
Those questions where you're a little confused yourself.
I was like, no, there's no trick question here. I'm just verifying before I pull the trigger on this. And then you tell me tomorrow or in 3 hours when I see you, wish you wouldn't have done that.
Right.
Because of something I just didn't foresee.
Well, because you're going to have to live with them afterwards.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. But that's part of it.
Then I have to hear them.
Come on. But that's embracing that. Life is about the moment after the moment. In other words, you can win an award, you could get the accolade, and there's that key moment. But life's about the moment after that. In other words, if you have nobody to share that with, what's the point of winning it?
There is no point.
Right. And so I think the sooner we can kind of embrace that we do need each other, we do want to measure, and we'll have a better product for it as well. And so if we embrace the idea of community, it goes better for sure. So I forget what I was talking about before we got to autonomy and community.
Leading up.
Oh, leading up. There it was. So that being said, so leading up.
How do you empower someone to lead up? Why is leading up so important? You've mentioned it a few times. You've lightly dabbled in it, but I really want.
And there's great skills to help do this. Okay. There's great listening skills and great confrontation skills and problem solving skills that would all be worth listening to help do this. But part of it is embracing that if I'm going to be a great leader, no matter where I am on the org chart, then part of my responsibility or part of what makes me a great leader is leading up. And part of that decision is I can decide who I want to be. I can't decide who they decide to be. And so if I'm going to sleep at night, I'm going to go, okay, I decided to bring this up. I decided to approach this. I decided to do that.
Gotcha.
There's something too in that, we were sharing earlier where people have opinion. Everybody's got an opinion. And in church world, we could kind of filter it a little bit. And you can do it in business as well. In other words, just because everybody has an opinion about what you should do or how you should do it or what should be done or what you should focus on, it doesn't mean you have to listen to them just because they have something to say. And so a lot of times it's good to kind of run it through a filter. And so in church world, the filter was, well, one, do they love the church? All right. Do they love me? And the third was, do they love Jesus? Because then we'll hold that in common. Mm-hmm. And if the answer is yes to all three, then I might consider what they have to say. Mm. But if it's, they don't really love me, why do I want to listen to their advice? They don't really love the church. They don't. I think in business too, it's a lot of times it is. Do they care about me? Do they care about this business that we're talking about together? And I would say, do they care about themselves? Because again, we go back. If they're drained, they got nothing to get. Why am I going to take advice from somebody who doesn't like themselves and they're drained out and there's no gain there for them? It's typically not great advice. And so again, sometimes just because that happens. And so that being said, if I'm going to give advice, if I'm going to lead up, I better care about the organization. Mm-hmm. I better care about the other person. And I better care about myself as well. And if I can answer yes to those three, then it's probably good to bring it up and to do that and do it in that spirit. So,
I love that. Yeah. I want to talk about your book. You're giving me a perfect segue to
okay, it. All right.
Bestseller, Blind Potential.
Blind Potential, yep.
How, and you can pull from the book or just what you've learned, okay. How do you inspire someone to find that potential? So I've got this maybe bad idea that the more someone comes into a business, the later they come into a business, the less they love it. It's like I go by 50%. If you start a business, you love it 100%. It's your thing. Okay. The next person's 50% less. The person after that's 50% less. How do you inspire to bring up those numbers and have someone find their potential?
That's good. So, and when you're saying 50%, you're saying like you're hiring people, you're bringing them on board, you're bringing them on board for the mission. Mm-hmm. But really, it was your vision, and so it was your mission to bring it to fruition. All right. There you go. Make a wrap. All right. So they're gonna like it less, kind of thing. They just because it wasn't theirs. It wasn't theirs. Right. It wasn't there. It's not their baby.
Right.
How do they love it? Okay. By the way, I think the very cheap short answer to that is have them love you.
Okay.
And you build your relationship with them. I think that's the really quick answer to that. And because that you can decide. And so there's a lot of people who have helped me achieve or build things that, they were kind of excited about what I was really excited about, but they really liked working with me or they really loved working with me. And that was the payoff. And to do that. And I could take care of that. I could hear their needs and what they were excited about and be able to help do that. And so they did it for me more than the vision. Now, a lot of times it can catch on, right? Sometimes it can catch on.
Sure.
But again, it's the greatest asset of any organization is its people. So if you make it about
culture,
right? Yeah. Culture, right? If you make it about people, you can't lose, right? If you make it about that, if you prioritize people over procedures, products, policy, you can't lose. But once you start putting those products and policy, they're harder to get people excited about, at least for the long term. And but people get excited about people and the connections they make and get inspired to help and work harder for other people. All right, I'll segue back then to Blind Potential.
Yes.
All right. So I'll see if I can connect this dot. So that book, that's my third book. I also have four. I'm working on my fifth right now.
Well, we went from 3 to 5 real quick there. Hold on. Where was number 4?
4. So, okay.
You said that's my third book. I'm working on my 5th.
I'm going to have to go on your Amazon.
I understand you're working on your 5th, but just 30, not even 10 seconds. What's the 4th book before you even talk about it?
The 4th book is called Mentor Us. And it plays off of my first book, which was Mentor You. Okay. So in church world, this idea of we can tie this all together. Here we go. Oh, nice. But this idea of mentorship, that it takes other people to pour into you and you to pour into them. Okay. And everybody should have somebody before them, beside them, behind them. And the idea. So in your life, so when you look at those people do you have people who are before you, ahead of you, who are pouring into you? Do you have people beside you who you can, kind of hold each other accountable and cheer each other on? And then do you have those people behind you that you're pouring into? And so I did it I couldn't find a resource in the church, so we ended up creating one, learned how to publish it, which later, becomes all that stuff. And so that was Mentor You. And then at the church I was at, we built a wedding chapel, the idea to attract couples who want to get married, but we wanted to equip them for marriage. And so we pair them up with people in our church been married for a long time, and we had to create a resource. And so I took what we did Mentor You and I created Mentor Us. And so these are couples mentoring couples.
Gotcha.
And built that. So that was the fourth book.
Okay.
And so if you're looking for something to help your marriage, Mentor Us is a great resource. The third book, Blind Potential, was, well, part of it was my journey, a little bit of my journey. So I was diagnosed with an eye condition in my 20s. And that really, really helped me realize, okay, here I am 20, I'm starting a new job, I have my own place. You know, if ever a chance for autonomy, here it is, right? Yeah. I don't need anyone. Turns out I'm going to need somebody to, you know, read the subtitles or read the menu across the way, or I'm going to need help the rest of my life at some level.
Okay.
And so that helped me embrace the community sooner. And then what I realized is everybody's got something. Everybody's got something where, whether they realize it or not, it keeps them dependent upon other people. They're going to need other people in their life to overcome it. And if you don't think you got something, then that self-awareness thing may be a little off. And so, but we all got something, and and often the best answer to our problem is another person. And so we need those people. We need to do that. And so you asked me about then how do you reach when you have blind spots? How do you reach your potential?
Yeah.
And so the book kind of takes it from a couple different angles. One is sometimes you can see yourself from different angles, but a lot of times you can see yourself through others from different angles, and to do that. And there's a pathway and stuff in which to kind of see that. And then you can get a clearer picture of what is before you and what the kind of potential you have to unleash. You know, not just because you think it's there, but because there's different ways to ensure that it's there. And then you have a community who will cheer you on to go get it as well. So here's the quick synopsis.
I love that. We can go back into culture a little bit, and then I want to dive a little bit further into effectiveness. And because you train people to be effective.
Yes.
Which is very interesting. But culture, how often do you see in businesses that they're lacking culture?
They are lacking. Well, it's what kind of culture?
Okay.
Because every business has a culture. Just some are good and some are not good.
Okay.
So every business fosters some sort of culture.
Okay.
And it might be a culture of poor leadership. You know, or
do you see that a lot more than we would expect?
Oh, yeah. And the stats are something like 80% of Americans say they don't like where they work.
Oh,
and by the way, 20% of that 80% openly admit to working against the company. Like they're stealing paper clips or, you know, Staples at night, hoping they implode and get what they deserve.
Oh, God.
So it's something, it's most people don't like their jobs. And so they do what I do or you do and start your own company and then find people who started their own company, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of it, because of that. But yeah, that's so, and a lot of that has to do with culture. Yeah. By the way, do you know what the number one influence is whether or not you're going to enjoy your job? Or I'll give you I'll say that who is the number one influence of whether or not you're going to enjoy your job?
It's your boss, right?
Boss. Yes, your direct supervisor. Yeah. And so what happens is people will hire companies, but they'll quit their boss. In other words, you could go, I want to work for Disney. Disney would be great. That would be awesome. But if you get a lousy supervisor, you're quitting Disney.
Yeah.
You know, Google, they got ping pong tables everywhere. But if you get a lousy supervisor, you're quitting
I do
Google.
say that. Your wife and your boss affect your everyday life.
Yeah. Well, that's something to think about. So there's the idea that if you decide to be a great leader, and let's say, and you decide to lead in maybe in a supervisory position, and you are allowing people to go home and be better husbands, wives, parents, and all that, because the leader sets the tone, and it influences how they go home, and how they treat the people they go home to. So if you really embrace that, it's quite a big responsibility to be a great leader at work. The status somewhere at 50 to 70% supervisor influences how much we like our job.
Yeah. Wow. And understanding everyone's boundaries. Like everyone has a different boundary of some sort. Like for me, my entire team knows that somewhere in that 6 to 8 p.m. range every day, I am not going to be available.
Good.
I'm not. I got 2 kids, dinner, baths, bedtime routine, reading the books. These are all things that you are 100% aware of.
Yeah,
because I've gotten
I look
texts.
at it like, be aware when you text Kevin that you're not going to get an answer, but you'll get it the next day or whatever.
Or
happens.
it might even be like 8:30 after they go to bed. I might respond then, but if you texted me at 7 with an urgent question, there's a 99% chance I'm not seeing the text. My phone is down. I'm doing the whole routine, the whole dance with the kids, helping, eating dinner with the family, whatever the case may be. And that's 6 to 8. That is a boundary for me. And I've answered the phone during that window, and most of the time I regret it because, like, seriously, because either it took time away, or I come back and chaos has erupted.
Yep.
My wife's mad because I was supposed to be the second helping hand.
Yep.
But my point is, like, everyone has their boundaries. Like, I know when Dylan's is, I know when Ryan and Ken have theirs, and like just being aware of it. Like,
so you've made a leadership decision for your family, but it affects your work. In other words, you made a decision that from these hours, I'm unavailable because I'm prioritizing that time with these people. These are the people I'm not going to disappoint in this time. And by doing that, you have shaped your work culture. You have told your work culture that, hey, it's okay to set up boundaries and to prioritize your family. You've built that into culture by a decision you made over here. And that's what I'm saying, is that culture exists. And sometimes we think, oh, we don't focus on culture. That's fine. You're still building a culture.
You're creating a culture.
It's just a negative culture. It's just an abusive culture. Or it's that,
There's a belief that the word culture is a positive thing, but that's not at all true. Like, you look up the word in the dictionary, it's not going to doesn't necessarily say positive in the definition.
It's a real thing, right? And you can't outsource your culture. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. I mean, all those are real quotes. You can be the wisest, smartest, whatever. And so
can't outsource culture. I like
you can't,
that.
right?
That's
but you're making that. The leader sets the tone.
It's
still leadership. So there's a great book, Delivering Happiness. It's the story of Zappos. And in their story, which Zappos was the online sneaker company that Amazon eventually bought, but they kept the Zappos culture. So with Zappos, but in the story they tell, at one point, the heads of Zappos, they're trying to figure out, how do we take care, three things they decide to focus on: our culture, our brand, and our pipeline. Pipeline being, if you interact with people at this location, you have a similar experience at this location, or whether it's the warehouse or the customer experience is similar across the board. And they very quickly realize all they got to do is focus on one of those, and it'll take care of the other two. And they decide to focus on their culture, because they say brand is just a late reflection of your culture. So you could spend millions of dollars putting up billboards telling everybody you're a friendly, wonderful company to work with. But if your culture doesn't say that, they'll figure that out and know that's a lie.
Glassdoor is my favorite website.
There you go. There you go. But I mean, think of it. How many times do we decide whether or not we're buying a product or interacting with a company based off reviews? We will take the word of strangers in their interactions because we value that. Because what are we looking for? We're trying to figure out what's their culture. If I could buy it over here, I could buy it over there. If I have to return it, who's going to be the easiest to work with? That's a culture thing. And so so if you take care of culture, it takes care of your brand and it takes care of your pipeline. Then you'll have a consistency no matter where people interact. So I believe cultures, I was talking with another consultant from another agency the other day, but he was talking about they have their own pyramid, and at the very bottom is culture. If you don't get that right, if you're not trying to build a great culture, then it won't matter what you build on top of it, because it'll swallow it up.
Okay. So that was the base, and
that's
everything,
the base.
and we got built up. Okay.
And so to your answer, yes, there's a lot of people not working on the culture, and therefore they inherit it. It gets negative. It's kind of like stagnant water just gets ugly. So if you're not working on your culture,
you're full of these great quotes. I'll just keep writing things down.
It's gonna be faster. I was gonna say new T-shirt line coming soon.
Go ahead.
But I was just saying so. But if you are making strides and focusing on that, then the world is your oyster, right? There's so much you can build off of a positive, off of an energetic, off of a just great culture.
Yes. We're definitely to the back half of the podcast.
Okay.
And I want, for everyone who stuck around and listened to this point, I want to ask you to give them some key techniques and methods to being effective, whether they're a leader, whether they're the number 2 through 50 person in the business, to ensure that they're well prepared.
Okay, I'm gonna give you one that I think if leaders, let's assume you're embracing the role of leader, which we all are. We all influence people. Yep. We all have, just not everybody embraces it. But let's assume we embrace the role of leader and being a great leader. If there's one thing I see that if leaders could focus on more, it would change the game for everybody. It would be the skill of listening. And it's not just listen, because a lot of times they go, I listen to people. I listen, I hear what they say. It's no. Listening in the way that it's an active type of listening where the other person gets that you get them. Mm. So before, when you were talking about your kids and you're going, you're trying to figure out what they're thinking, but they're also feeling. And depending on how they're feeling, the tides shift. Like, well, people are like that too. Kids a little more in touch with their feelings, but people too. And so there is that EQ, there is that empathy. If we can reflect back to people and go, seems like you're a little upset with the price I just gave you. Mm. All right, just reflecting back, a feeling what they're thinking. That they get, and they may go, no, it's not the price. I'm just a little confused on, the process. Okay, so you're confused on the process. A lot of times we can just reflect back that we're getting what they're feeling and thinking. We generate a connection, and when we generate that connection, then they do want to work with us. Then they are motivated. They get that part on that Maslow's, hierarchy of needs. And whether that's a customer, client, whether that's a colleague, or just a family member, who get that we instead, because here's what we generally do. We say, oh, yeah, I listen. I just listen. I hear what they have to say, and then I say everything I want to say. Yeah. Right? And then I listen to them. I hear them. Then I want to tell them where they're wrong, or then I want to give them advice, or then I want to, cast judgment on what they just said. And if we just take a breath before we do any of that, if we could just take a breath and just make sure they hear that we hear what they're saying, I just think that one skill right there will make a world of difference in business, in selling, in church world, in family life. Wow. Right there.
I love that. Do you have a question? I've got another question.
Please.
So this is something that took me a long time to figure out, and I'm definitely still applying new knowledge to it. But how do you measure effectiveness as a leader?
So I would say, there's a lot of great definitions. One of my favorite definitions of leadership is the art of getting things done through people.
Okay.
Leadership is I like the art part. Leadership is the art, because there's an art to it, of getting things done through other people. So I'd say a couple things. If you're not getting anything done through people, you're ineffective. Okay. The other one would be if no one's following you because they don't want to, you're ineffective. Okay. The sense of a leader is that it involves other people. Sometimes people are like, I'm a great leader. Great, but nobody wants to be on your team, or nobody wants to be with you on that project. And
that's easy to see. Like, you can reflect back on that very easily.
Yeah. And it goes back to what we said earlier in the podcast, where people say something and there's 5 other people in the room, and the 5 people say, "What, are you blind? Like, you don't notice what's happening here?" Yeah. Yes, that's self-awareness. Yeah. Absolutely. We've all been in, dozens upon dozens of rooms where you're just like, they don't see the problem. Like, for real? Like, you just said A, but everyone else is thinking B.
If you got to tell people you're an effective leader, right? There's nobody to collaborate that story because nobody's with them. They haven't really,
Actions speak louder than words.
I think so. Yeah.
So there's my one-liner.
There you go.
You've had about 3 dozen in this episode.
That was like B tier top.
Oh no, what I just gave mine was C.
He's S tier.
I was like, no, mine was C. At best was C.
I'm just gonna reserve everything I've got.
I was gonna say we got a bunch of A's over here. All right,
that's great. There you go.
Well, I appreciate everything so much. I do want to talk to you. The only reason we're ending is because we're running out of time on the memory cards here. Can you tell everybody where to find you?
Sure. Yeah.
If they need consulting, or if you, have got any books in the works, what can they look forward to? Where can they find it?
All right. So number one place to go is twopennyconsulting.com. TWO Penny Consulting. twopennyconsulting.com. Really easy. If you go to that website right away, you'll see buttons of, set up a little chat with Tom and to do that. And we can do that. I do train organizations on how to do those listening skills, how to problem solve, how to confront, how to build that into your culture so you have great communication tools, and to really focus in your culture. One of the things we teach and we then go back and measure is fun in the workplace, that matters. And so we do have the ability to train. We do have the ability to track, and not just your teaching employees, but are they demonstrating it and how well, and we can score and measure that. And then we call it troubleshooting, where we can help different individuals on, some different problem solving and where they want to go and get over some hurdles, and to do that as well. Any books or speaking and all that fun stuff, that's all, you'll find that at twopennyconsulting.com. You can go check out those. Hear more one-liners, I'm sure, to do that.
Love that.
So
it's gonna be a mandatory component.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. And there's. Anyway, that's great. And there's the opportunity as well, too. We're doing we're launching one this summer, kind of we're calling it like a VIP leadership club kind of deal, where to kind of keep you in touch with us and different tricks, tips, hacks on leadership and how to bring that into your organization. So,
love that. Well, thank you for joining us. We'll add everything into the show notes so people can find you real easy.
I'll do this, too. I watched Ted Yates' thing. Ted Yates is a good friend. I cannot do that. Guy is brilliant when it comes to that. But let me give your audience a gift, and that is if you go to twopennyconsulting.com and you want to reach out and talk, about some trainings or tracking or troubleshooting and what that might look like, I'll give them 20% off if on those services that if they decide to take me up on, and we'll work together and help their organization or help them.
Amazing. You heard it. Tell them where you found them.
Yep. Two Stories Media, appreciate that with 2 Penny. That's perfect.
Yeah, I know. What a good collab.
As soon as you started spelling the TWO, I was like, you know the drill. I've been doing it for years myself.
Yeah. Mention this podcast. That's how you
love that.
So.
Well, Tom,
thank you. And also mention that you subscribed to this podcast.
Like, comment, subscribe.
Okay. Gotta press
that
button.
notification
You gotta be
bell.
subscribed to this podcast. I'll give you the 20%.
It's a big red button. You can't miss it.
There you go.
Tom, thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
Appreciate you.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Wow. Awesome. Good deal.